Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the program. And on this episode, I'm going to be talking about The Screaming Skull. This is a 1958 horror film that runs exactly 68 minutes and still feels like it's testing your will to live. The film was never registered with the US Copyright Office, which means it fell into the public domain immediately. It will exist forever now. It cannot be killed, which is ironic for a film that promised to kill you. Yes, that's how the film starts. It opens on a coffin, just a coffin sitting there doing coffin things, and a narrator delivers the following pitch.
The Screaming Skull is a motion picture that reaches its climax in shocking horror. Its impact is so terrifying that it may have an unforeseen effect. It may kill you. Therefore, its producers feel they must assure free burial services to anyone who dies of fright while seeing The Screaming Skull.
The camera then pushes into the coffin's interior to reveal a small sign that reads, "Reserved for you." Now, this seems like a ripoff of William Castle, who just 5 months earlier had pulled the same insurance gimmick for his film Macabre, except Castle actually purchased a real policy from Lloyd's of London. Aside from that, he also hired nurses to stand in the lobby and had hearses parked outside the theater. The director of this film did nothing like that. He just said it. No policy, no paperwork, no legal framework whatsoever. He basically said, if you die, we'll bury you, with the same contractual weight as me promising you a helicopter. And here's the thing, the film is 68 minutes long. The most dangerous thing about watching it is the potential to develop a deep vein thrombosis from sitting there motionless for an hour while nothing really happens. If anyone died during a screening of The Screaming Skull, it was from their body shutting down out of sheer self-preservation. But sure, reserved for me. I'm flattered. The credits roll over the estate's decorative garden pond. Amid lily pads and bubbling water, a skull slowly rises from beneath the surface. A lily pad is draped over it like a tiny green beret. The skull emerges from the pond the way you emerge from a bath when you hear your phone ring, reluctantly and with vegetation stuck to your head. Then the score kicks in, a blasting tuba, a piano pounding like someone's having a medical event on the keys, and a woman vocalizing at a pitch that suggests she just sat on something unexpected. This is the work of Ernest Gold, who 2 years later would win an Academy Award for the score to Exodus. This man heard the finished product of this score, tuba, panic piano, and what sounds like a soprano being startled by a spider, and thought, yes, this is horror music. The pond, by the way, is where the first wife died and is where the husband will die. It is essentially a puddle-sized serial killer. If this pond had a Yelp page, the reviews would say, beautiful lilies, terrible survival rate. 1 star. Anyways, the movie starts with newlyweds Eric and Jenni Whitlock pulling up in a Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing, a car that is, without exaggeration, the most expensive thing in this entire production. The car cost more than the actors. The car cost more than the script. The car has more charisma than every human being in this film put together. If the car had been cast as the lead, it would have been a better movie. And I know that you think that I'm joking, but I assure you, I am not. Eric is bringing Jenni home to the house he shared with his deceased first wife, Marion. And here's where things get immediately suspicious for anyone who has ever seen a movie before. The house is completely unfurnished. No furniture, no phone, no electricity. They're sleeping on cots and using candles. Eric's explanation is that Marion threw out all of her parents' old furniture because she wanted to start fresh with new pieces, but she died before they could finish redecorating. So the house has been sitting empty for what appears to be years, with no furniture, no phone service, and no power. This is the point when any reasonable human being would say, Eric, I love you, but I'm going to a Holiday Inn. I'll even settle for a Motel 6. Instead, Jenni, who we will learn has spent time in a mental institution and is psychologically fragile, says, "Okay, sounds great. Let's sleep in the dark murder house on camping cots with a giant portrait of your dead wife as the only decoration." The estate itself is admittedly beautiful, lavish grounds, extensive gardens, and peacocks roaming freely like they own the place. Floyd Crosby's black and white cinematography makes it look genuinely atmospheric and moody. And this is the fundamental tragedy of The Screaming Skull. It looks like a real movie. The photography promises you Hitchcock, but delivers you a Halloween prop. The couple is greeted by Reverend Edward Snow and his wife, Mrs. Snow, who have brought a basket of fresh eggs as a welcome gift. Because nothing says welcome to your new home where your husband's first wife died mysteriously like a dozen eggs. Here, have some protein with your psychological trauma. The Snows help hang curtains and make polite conversation, and this is where the film begins its long, loving relationship with exposition. The Reverend, with all the subtlety of a man reading a Wikipedia article out loud, tells Jenni exactly how Marion died. She slipped on a wet leaf, bashed her head on the wall at the base of her skull, and fell into the decorative pond where she drowned.
It was thought that she hit her head on the edge of the cement wall where we're sitting. And she fell in there. She died in the water. That's where Eric found her 10 minutes later.
So let me just diagram that death for you. She slipped on a leaf in the rain, hit her head on a wall, specifically at the base of her skull, then fell into a pond and drowned. I mean, at what point do you stop calling this an accident and start calling it a cartoon? I've seen Wile E. Coyote deaths with fewer steps. This woman didn't die. She speed ran every possible cause of death simultaneously. Jenni confides to the Reverend that her own parents died by drowning, so she's moved into a house where someone drowned, in a pond she can see from her window every day. This is less a marriage and more a psychology experiment about how much irony a human being can tolerate before they snap. Jenni is introduced to Mickey, the estate's gardener, played by director Alex Nichol. Mickey is mentally disabled, childlike, barely verbal, and skulks around the property. Now let's talk about what Alex Nichol did here. For his acting role, he chose the character who speaks less than anyone else in the movie. This man looked at the cast list: a leading man, a leading lady, a reverend's wife, and a gardener who could barely form sentences, and said, "I'll take the gardener." He directed himself into the easiest job on set. He gave himself the role that requires him to basically show up, look confused, and occasionally carry some flowers. Like, this isn't self-casting, this is self-care. And I really appreciate it. The Snows stay for dinner, which I assume consists entirely of eggs, given that's the only food anyone has brought. At one point, Eric has a private conversation with Mrs. Snow, in which he reveals that Jenni is very wealthy, as well as the full scope of Jenni's psychological backstory. Her parents drowned right in front of her, and she couldn't save them. She then suffered a complete psychological breakdown. She's fragile, impressionable, easily destabilized, and especially sensitive to anything involving death and tragedy. Turns out she spent over a year in a sanitarium. He's strategically disclosing his wife's mental vulnerability to outside witnesses so that later, when she starts screaming about skulls, everyone will think she's having another psychological breakdown. This is the Gaslight Playbook. This is Chapter 1, Page 1 of the manual for driving your wife insane so you can inherit her fortune. And Eric is executing it in front of a minister and his wife while they eat eggs that he didn't even provide. I mean, the audacity it's almost impressive. That night, in the empty, candlelit, furniture-free murder estate, Jenni tries to sleep, but she is awakened by a loud, persistent pounding. Now, I want you to imagine this. You are a psychologically fragile woman who spent a year in an institution. You have moved into a dark, unfurnished house where your husband's first wife died. There is no phone. There is no electricity. You are sleeping on a camping cot in candlelight, and something starts banging in the dark. Most people would leave. Most people would leave their body. Jenni, however, gets up to investigate because apparently the sanitarium didn't cover basic self-preservation instincts. She finds an open window panel slamming in the wind. She goes to close it, and then a bizarre, piercing shriek cuts through the darkness like someone is slowly deflating a balloon made of nightmares. Then she notices it, hanging in the empty room, a self-portrait of Marion. Marion looks exactly like Jenni's dead mother. the woman she already has catastrophic guilt about, the woman whose death she blames herself for. Jenni then bolts from the room and collides with Eric, who opens the window and shows her the peacocks. This jerk throws an ashtray at them, which prompts one of them to scream, and he's like, "See? That's what you heard. It was the peacocks." It's Just the Peacocks becomes Eric's version of It's Just the Wind, or You're Imagining Things. It's his all-purpose dismissal, his Swiss Army gaslighting tool. Hear a scream? Peacocks. Skull on the doorstep? Peacocks. See a strange figure wandering around in the greenhouse? Somehow also peacocks. If Jenni woke up to find Eric standing over top of her with a pillow, he'd say a peacock did it. The next morning, Eric announces he needs to go into town to run errands, leaving Jenni all alone in the dark, empty house where she had a panic attack 12 hours ago, on day 2 of their marriage. Once Eric drives away, Jenni sees Mickey and offers to accompany him to Marion's grave, which is located on the property because, of course it is. Why would the grave be in a cemetery like a normal person? No, it's right here on the estate, 10 feet from the house, so that everyone can enjoy their morning coffee with the view of a tombstone. And what a stone it is. I mean, just look at this thing. It has Marion's face carved into it. Not a photograph, not an engraving, a full 3-dimensional carved face staring out from the grave marker like Marion is trying to push her way through from the other side. This is like some Frighteners type shit. It looks less like a memorial and more like Marion got partially absorbed into the rock during some kind of geological incident.
She cries
Cries?
in the night.
Dead people don't cry, Mickey.
I heard her.
Mickey?
Excellent conversation. Very productive. Nothing alarming about any of this whatsoever. A childlike man who lives next to the grave told you the dead woman weeps at night, then fled into the shrubbery. No, everything is fine. This is normal. Anyways, that night, Eric still hasn't returned because he's off doing important town errands that definitely aren't skull related. Jenni falls asleep and has a nightmare montage about Marion until she's woken up by another scream.
She died in the water. The base of her skull was smashed. She didn't want to die. She died in the water.
So she goes to the window to look outside, and then the armoire behind her opens up, and holy crap, it's the skull! So she runs back into her room and continues to freak out over her thoughts. She died in the water, just in case you forgot. Also, sorry about all the eggs. It's really the only thing we eat over at our house. And I'll be honest with you, I'm sick of it. All eggs, all the time, it's just too much. I'll eat anything at this point, even one of those peacocks. No, seriously, I'm just kidding. Seriously, do you have a cookbook I could borrow? Maybe one with a recipe for large, colorful birds? This is the first major appearance of the skull, and to her eternal credit, Jenni picks it up and hurls it out the window, just chucks it, overhand, into the night. Then the film does something genuinely creative. It cuts to the skull's point of view on the ground, slowly panning towards the front door as if the skull is moving under its own power. This raises critical questions. The skull has no eyes, no legs, no means of propulsion, so is it rolling? Floating? I don't know, the film doesn't say. The skull just has initiative now. It's self-motivated. It's the most ambitious character in the movie, quite honestly. The skull then appears on the doorstep. Jenni opens the door and it rolls through the doorway towards her across the carpet with the menace of a bocce ball being thrown by someone's grandmother. The big turning point comes later when Eric and Jenni burn Marion's portrait and Jenni finds a skull in the ashes. She screams and points at it, but Eric looks at the exact same skull and says, "Well, I don't see anything." He's standing in front of physical evidence and saying no to reality itself. If Eric was alive today, he could have an extremely successful career in politics. After Jenni faints, Eric picks up the skull and hides it in the pond, confirming what we suspected. He's been planting skulls and denying their existence. He's gaslighting his wife to drive her insane and claim her fortune. Meanwhile, Mickey is watching all of this from the bushes as the only witness to the crime. Eric tells the Reverend that Jenni has suffered a nervous breakdown and confides that she previously attempted suicide, which is why she was institutionalized. He is, of course, constructing a fake narrative that will explain why his wealthy wife is about to die. Believing that she has truly lost her mind, Jenni sadly resigns herself to being committed to the sanitarium again. And this is actually quite sad, if you could set aside the rolling skull for a moment. Because Jenni is a decent person who has been systematically dismantled by a sociopath. After Snow leaves, Jenni mentions to Eric that the Reverend is going to bring over some men to search the entire property the next day to see if the skull is actually real. And this is when it hits him. The property will be searched. The skull is in the pond. A search could find it. His entire scheme would unravel because a minister decided to try and help someone. I mean, why the hell can't he just mind his own business? Eric's face registers the same expression you'd see on a student who just realized the final exam is tomorrow and they haven't opened the textbook. Except instead of a textbook, it's a murder plot, and instead of an exam, it's prison. Eric goes to retrieve the skull from the pond before it can be found. He reaches the water's edge, plunges his hand in, and it's gone. The skull isn't there. He hid it in the pond. He specifically remembers hiding it in the pond. He is standing in the pond and the skull is not in the pond. The skull has left. The skull has somewhere else to be. The skull has a schedule and it doesn't involve being retrieved by a man with blood on his hands. So it turns out that Mickey took it, but Eric doesn't know that yet. All Eric knows is that his psychological torture prop has developed the ability to leave ponds unsupervised. Here's where the film gets interesting in its own confused way. The haunting is also real. Eric has been faking supernatural events, but Marion's ghost is also haunting the estate independently. So when Jenni visits the greenhouse at night, she encounters Marion's full-body apparition, a ghost in a white dress. And this is really weird. The ghost appears to prance as it chases Jenni. Not glide, not float menacingly, prance, like a specter that took ballet lessons and wants you to know about it. Meanwhile, Mickey, the hero nobody expected, takes the skull to the Snows and manages, through sheer determination and a plastic prop, to communicate Eric's crime. He's like Lassie, if Lassie couldn't bark and had to bring the evidence directly to the police station.
Where did you find this?
Pond?
Eric attempts to strangle Jenni and stage it as a suicide, but he doesn't bother checking if she's actually dead, because apparently murder is like a term paper. You can do all the research and then forget to submit it. Then Marion comes for him, standing in the doorway, a full skeleton wearing Marion's white dress, hat, and veil. A skeleton bride on his doorstep, looking like she just arrived from the world's worst wedding. Eric grabs a stool and hurls it at her, and the skeleton just explodes, but the skull survives because the skull always survives. What follows is the most magnificently absurd sequence in 1950s horror. The skull rolls down the stairs, and you can clearly see a stick tipping it over on camera. Nobody said, hey, maybe reshoot the one where you can see the stick, but at this point in the 6-week production, standards were probably reduced to, is the camera pointing the right way? Okay, print it. The skull then begins appearing everywhere, floating through the air via double exposure, popping up around corners. At one point, Eric runs to his Mercedes, yanks open the gull-wing door, and finds the skull sitting in the driver's seat. The skull got there first. The skull has better transportation access than most people. The music during this entire sequence sounds like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Tuba, slapstick piano. It's supposed to be terrifying, but it sounds like a haunted polka. So the skull attacks Eric's throat, and he stumbles into the decorative pond and drowns, in the same water where he killed Marion. The man who faked a haunting was killed by a real one. The irony is so thick you could spread it on toast. Jenni survives because Eric couldn't even commit murder competently. The Snows arrive in time to comfort Jenni and to get her the hell out of there.
Why did he do it?
For your money. The question is now, did Marion die in an accident? suppose we'll never know.
No, we do know. He definitely murdered her. I mean, isn't that obvious? This is what he does. He goes around marrying wealthy women and killing them for their money. I mean, is that not obvious? I mean, I know technically we'll never know, but we know. The film was shot in 6 weeks at the Huntington Hartford estate in the Hollywood Hills, a genuinely gorgeous mansion with sprawling gardens, decorative ponds, and roaming peacocks. And here's the wild part about this movie. They had talent. Oscar-winning cinematographer Floyd Crosby, who shot High Noon. Oscar-winning composer Ernest Gold, who would go on to score Exodus, as I mentioned before. Lead actress Peggy Weber, who worked with both Orson Welles and Alfred Hitchcock. And with all of that assembled, they made a movie about a plastic skull that rolls across the floor like somebody lost their bowling ball at a haunted bowling alley. It promised to kill you with fright, but threatens to kill you with pacing. The free coffin should come with a free pillow, because the most likely cause of death during a screening is falling asleep and hitting your head on the armrest. I want to thank all of my supporters on Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, and my YouTube channel members. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, but that's pretty much it for this one, and I'll see you all next time. And you gotta kind of wonder, like, dude, why you gotta murder her for her wealth? Like, aren't you wealthy? I mean, look at this estate. Obviously, you inherited this from your dead wife, you know, I mean, whatever.